Alright, let's get started. Vintage color grading for your iPhone. Or something like that. Alright, what is up everybody? Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for clicking on this video. We are Moment, and we like making videos for YouTube. Yeah, that's it. That's who we are. That's all we do. Today we are talking about how to make your iPhone footage look vintage, that filmy, grainy, vibey look that we all know and love, emulating film. We are gonna run through how to color grade your footage to make it look like that. But first, before we dive in, we just released a new app called Retro, and if you are looking to make your footage vibey, filmy, grainy, and look dope as quickly as possible, then the Retro app is definitely the easiest way to do that. It is great for TikTok, for Byte. I don't know if people are using that yet. Byte, Instagram stories, and whatever else. These looks were made by filmmakers. I made two myself. One's a black and white called Chromatier. The other one's called Obeyed. Both those words, I don't know what they mean. They just sounded cool to me. But yeah, check out the looks. It's super fun. Download the app. Now let's dive into the more technical side of color grading your footage, your iPhone footage to look vintage in Premiere Pro. All right, so first things first, guys, before we even get started, we have made an adjustment layer. We will be doing all of our changes on that adjustment layer. That is a great way to kind of just toggle on and off with this little eye right here to see what you're actually doing to your clip. As we look at this clip, it looks pretty good. I mean, it looks kind of bright and punchy. It looks a little, definitely doesn't look vintage yet. But overall, the color looks pretty nice. So first, I'm gonna dive into some basic corrections here. You'll see here that these scopes are pretty cool. It kind of is your whole reading of what the image is. So it's basically just a copy in scope form of what your image is. So you can see here this red is actually kind of blown out. So if I zoom in to his jacket, it's actually a little blown out, which is kind of funny. Not funny, just like a bummer, I guess. But here, okay, so first I'm gonna kind of take my blacks down a little bit. You'll see the scopes as they move. I want my blacks to start off kind of black, and then I'll go my whites a little up, kind of up that exposure. But then I want my highlights to be down a little bit because I don't want everything to be too blown out. A little on and off of what we're doing. I also want to make this a little warmer. I'm gonna go for a little bit of a warmer tone for this image. A lot of times vintage stuff can either look warm or cold. So yeah, and we'll kind of get to that. But right now, I'm just kind of toying with this image, up the contrast a little bit. And honestly, exposure, I mean, do we just go a little bit higher? Or maybe just, yeah, just a little bit of love on the exposure there. So that is what we're doing so far. It's already looking pretty good. I'm just bumped. I just overexposed the jacket a little bit. But that's all right. And you can see here, if I dump the highlights, there's really no saving the data there. So all good. You know, sometimes mistakes happen. Okay, cool. So next, I'm gonna go into the creative tab here, and you will see something called faded film. If you just crank that up, you'll see how it's trying to emulate a film, nostalgic, vibey, warm, whatever look. But I really don't like it. I think it just targets everything. So if you like that look, use it. If you don't, then don't. But you'll see here, if we go to curves, this is pretty cool. Basically, up here you have your whites, here you have your midtones, and here you have your darks. So I'm gonna put a little keyframe there, and I'm gonna target my own fade here. So you can see how I'm actually gonna put a keyframe there so it doesn't move it, but you can see how as I start to bend this, if you look in the upper corners, I'm kind of adding my own fade. And if I go this way, oh, a little crazy there. If I go this way, you can see how it makes it a little crunchier. This way makes it a little more faded. So I'm gonna go right there, which looks pretty good. And here you can toggle it on and off. And you can see how I'm kind of just doing my own fade. So rather than using that faded film, I think that looks pretty sick. And we can always come back to this too. I feel like this is one of those things where I do like to come back to it. And then we can kind of fast forward, see how that's looking. Okay, cool. So we can go ahead and close our curves. We can go to color wheel. Now, this is pretty important for vintage looks, I think. this is where I'm gonna go for something warm. So I'm gonna target the shadows here and make them a little warmer. And that is gonna make a huge difference. Like that already is making that look so much more vintage. A lot of times film has a lot of color in those highlights and in those shadows. So that is looking pretty good. Now for my highlights, I'm gonna go the other way. I don't want my water to look orange. I want it to look blue. Water is typically not orange, it's typically a little bluer. So if you can see here, it's kind of targeting a lot of the highlights, almost looking a little too magenta. I'm just kind of toying with this here, and then boom. Okay, cool. So now let me doom. Awesome, that's looking pretty sick. I am honestly pretty hyped with how that's looking so far. Looking pretty dope. I am going to, real quick, if you want to know how to get rid of a keyframe, let's say I do one here, you just command click and then it gets rid of it. So that took me a long time to learn, so hopefully that saves you some time. All right, next we're gonna hop into the HSL here. Now this is kind of how you target colors. So you can see here, if I want to target this red, it's gonna show you what you are targeting. So as I go here, it's like, okay, it's gonna kind of wash out what you're targeting. Cool, and then I'm gonna target his beanie. I want his beanie to look, to have a nice color to it, nice little pop. So you can see here, because I'm highlighting on the yellow, that is the yellow completely desaturated, and then boom, it fully saturated. And you can see it in his beanie and in the moss. A lot of times I see film has a specific color that's pretty poppy, and here that to me is this yellow. So I want that yellow to be nice and poppy. So if I target that, boom, boom. So that's looking pretty good. One thing I forgot to do was under the faded film was to adjust saturation and vibrance. So I see a lot of film, kind of vintage retro looks. The saturation isn't super high, but there's still vibrance. So I feel like that to me is pretty important. So yeah, that's looking pretty sick so far. I kind of want to get a little more red in the shadows, and then I could even, what happens if I pop those shadows up? Nah, let's keep them low. And I'm actually going to dump my midtones here a little bit. Yeah, that's looking pretty nice. Let me just full screen this. Sick. Okay, that's looking pretty cool. And then here we can toggle on and off. It's always good to toggle on and off of like what you're actually doing, because you might be going crazy. But you can see here, like that's so blue and cool, and then that's looking warm and kind of retro and kind of rad. Sick. Another important thing to note here is as he turns, you really want to be aware of his skin tones. I feel like vintage looks can interfere with skin tones a lot and make them look kind of weird. His skin looks great though. I think that's one nice thing about a warmer vintage look is usually skin tones look pretty nice. If you wanted this image to be a little bluer, you could then go into the color wheels and go the opposite way. So what I did is I went a little warmer, but you could go a little bluer. So you could go start dumping these to a bluish. And a lot of times you'll see film have blue in the shadows too. But for me, it just doesn't look, I don't know, it doesn't fit the image. This image should be warm to me, so the blue doesn't really work. Sometimes you'll see green in shadows too. And that looks pretty cool, but also is pretty wild. But I feel like green, a lot of people use a lot. So I'll go there and then there. That's the kind of warm, maybe gonna go a little higher. I'm gonna get crazy. Get a little crazy with it. Sometimes it's good to get crazy. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to creative and I'm gonna toggle through some of these looks. Now, if you're gonna use a look that's built into Adobe, do not go crazy. You'll see here, if I double click this, boom, it kind of makes everything look different, but then I can go here and I can target the adjustment. So that's our edit. And then if I just go kind of have this at like a 15, maybe a 20, I think what's nice is I don't need this, but I feel like color correcting, color grading is all about just layers of looks. And if you wanted to be super dialed, you could create an adjustment layer for each thing that you were doing. So here we have an adjustment layer and you could do that. I don't think you have to. I would show you how to do that, but I don't normally do it, so I don't want to lie to you guys and say that my color correcting is like the sickest thing ever or super organized, because most of the time it is not. But yeah, so right now we can actually toggle that on and off and see what that's doing to the image. And it's just a nice little layer. So boom, boom. That is looking pretty Pretty cool. Now the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some grain. I bought some film emulation grain, 16 mil, 8 mil, and 35 mil grain with the film gates and everything from a company called Tropic Color, and then also from a filmmaker named Ezra Cohen. But what's nice is that Premiere actually has some stuff built in. So you don't need to go buy anything. Premiere has some stuff built in, and if you search grain in Effects tab, you'll see there's something called noise. Now I'm gonna drop that on. This will make your computer run a little slower, and I'm gonna add a little bit of noise. So if you zoom in, you will see the noise. Now, toggle it off, it looks all sharp and polished, put it on, and all of a sudden there's this texture, there's noise. And I think some people are a little afraid of noise because it's like, why would you make your image purposely not as good? But that is what a vintage look is. I think it looks really, really cool. So if I go here, I'm gonna save before my computer crashes. So if I full screen, you can see how there's this colored grain in the image. And I think it looks super sick. And I think that's very characteristic. Whoa. So that is looking pretty good. Sorry, I'm back from that. If we go to our adjustment layer, turn it off, kind of blue, kind of green, boom, on. Looks pretty nice. I think another thing you can do here in the creative tab is actually like unsharpen the image. Sometimes people will crank this up and it just makes the lines very defined. Sometimes I'll kind of go in here and I'll toggle it lower, maybe like a -5. A lot of film is a little softer. You don't see super harsh lines. But that's not essential. That's just something that you can do or not do, whatever you want. All right, now the last thing I want to kind of mention is so right now, because we're kind of going for a warmer look, his skin looks really nice. Let's go into 150 and kind of view his skin. Yeah, his skin is looking pretty sweet. But let's say his skin was like too orange or something. You would go into this HSL tab and you could like target his skin. All you do is do this teardrop, boom, right on his skin, and it targets that color. And then you would go down here and change whatever you see fit. That's a super cool way to kind of make sure that his skin looks good. Sometimes with vintage looks, again, it can get a little wonky, and that is how you would fix that. But yeah, right there, that is our look. Let me just render that and we'll play it back. It's gonna take forever to render. Comment below what you guys do when you're rendering. Do you like go on Twitter? Do you go on another social media? Like there's anything else you could do? Do you eat? I think eating's good. Maybe you go use the toilet. I don't know. Sometimes I just sit there and stare at it. Ooh, looking pretty cool. All right, there it is, rendered. That noise looks sick. Okay, I'm gonna go full screen. All right, so now that I am looking at this, it looks pretty good. I would say the noise is pretty noticeable, so I might, if I wanted to kind of go through this and refine it a little more, I might dump the noise a little bit. Right now I have it at 15. You can decrease that to however low you want. But overall, it looks pretty good. I'm happy with how that looks. It's so much different than before. So here is with the look, there is without. So boom, that is without the look, and then I'll go here with the look. So different, and I'll export both and put them on the screen so you can check it out. All right, everybody, so that about wraps it up. Hopefully this was helpful and a good foundation for how you can make your footage look more vintage, retro, grainy, vibey, whatever you want to call it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And yeah, would love to see how you guys color grade your vintage footage and like what tips. I don't know. If you have a tip for someone who's watching this video and you're like, oh, this is what I do, and Niles didn't mention that because he's a dummy, leave that in the comments below because I would love to know. I am not a professional colorist. This is just kind of what I do and kind of my process. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'm gonna chug the rest of my coffee. It was really cold because I've been sitting here for an hour, but it was pretty good. Wow, I'm about to just zing, get all amped, and the video's over. So I have all this hype now, but the video's over. I can literally feel the caffeine like pulsing through me. So that's cool. See you guys.